Oxygen Dividend. On Dividend morning, the whole city learned to breathe politely. Veyer's public speakers woke at 6 with the same soft chime they used for funerals, tax forgiveness, and smog breach alerts. Then the Ministry of Atmosphere began its monthly prayer. Clean air is a shared inheritance, the city said. Measured restraint protects every lung. Mara Cal heard the words through the thin wall above her mother's oxygen concentrator. The machine answered with its own rhythm. Draw, filter, sigh, draw, filter, sigh. It had been doing that for 3 years, ever since her mother's lungs turned the color of old paper after the second refinery winter. Mara stood still until the household meter finished sampling her. The brass ring on her wrist warmed. A blue number opened beneath her skin. Oxygen dividend pending, 42, 7 liters. Mara blinked. The city owed most clerks 12. Careful clerks got 18. People with public service multipliers sometimes reached 25 if they lived alone, avoided exertion, and did not keep elderly parents breathing in the same apartment. 42.7 was not a dividend. It was a confession. Her mother called from the bed alcove. If it is bad, lie first. I prefer breakfast before disaster. Mara closed her sleeve over the glowing number. It is generous. Then it is bad. Veyer City had been built after the ocean took the low districts and the air began arriving in different qualities. The rich bought sealed towers. Everyone else moved into the municipal stack, where oxygen was rationed through civic behavior. A citizen who rode the stairwell instead of the carbon lift received credit. A citizen who missed a shift lost credit. A citizen who breathed too fast during a protest paid for the panic by Friday. Mara worked in the Dividend Authority because she was good at finding people who stole breath. She could identify a forged sleep profile from the shape of a pause. She knew when a household claimed an extra child to raise its baseline. She knew how grief changed ventilation patterns and how quickly the city punished grief for sounding inefficient. At 8, she took the tram to the audit hall through a tunnel lined with congratulatory screens. Today, Veyer returns what you saved. Above the words, the mayor smiled with both hands folded over his chest, as if protecting something fragile inside his suit. At her desk, Mara opened the compliance queue. Illegal nursery tanks, black market breath masks, dead grandparents kept active for credit. Then her own file appeared. Cal Mara, Household Surplus Review. Her supervisor, Tavin Hess, had already flagged it in red. Mara felt the office air become too expensive. Tavin leaned over the partition. You see it. I see a false positive. I hope so. The mayor's ceremony is at noon. We are clearing anomalies before broadcast. Mara opened the full record. Her monthly intake, sleep rate, work exertion, stair credits, filial care deductions, and ration penalties arranged themselves into a clean civic portrait. Then came the surplus log. Night breathing event 0114-0452. Location, Cal household. Respiration confidence 99, 83%. Recipient, Mara Cal. Mara had not slept at home that night. She had been in the audit hall, manually reviewing a council district with suspiciously relaxed lungs. The meter had recorded 3 hours and 38 minutes of breathing for her anyway. Not stolen oxygen. Assigned oxygen. The difference was what made her hands cold. Mara did what honest people did when the system caught them incorrectly. She tried to prove the system was right about everything else. She checked the tram gates. They showed her entering the audit hall at 1942 and leaving at 0613. She checked the office cameras. They showed her hunched under blue glass with a ration tea she had forgotten to drink. She checked the stairwell counter at home. No entry, no exit, no guest respiration, no maintenance scan. Still, the household meter insisted she had breathed in her apartment for 3 hours and 38 minutes. She opened the raw waveform. A breath pattern rose across the screen. Shallow inhale, pause, longer exhale, hesitation at the end, then another inhale as if the lungs were not sure permission had been granted. Mara stopped moving. Her mother breathed that way when pain broke through the medication. She ran a comparison. Match 41, 2%, not her mother. She ran herself. Match 37, 8%, not Mara either. Tavin came back with 2 coffees and the expression of a man carrying bad instructions. You need to certify it as a personal overclaim. Mara looked up slowly. Before I investigate, before the ceremony, the minister wants clean numbers. The numbers are not clean. That is why they need certifying. He placed 1 coffee on her desk. It smelled like burnt grain and municipal mercy. Listen to me. If this becomes household fraud, your mother's medical allocation goes into review. The queue is 6 weeks. She does not have 6 weeks. Then make this boring. That was the city's favorite word for obedience. Boring meant no hearing. Boring meant no committee. Boring meant no one important had to breathe harder while explaining why another citizen could breathe less. Mara copied the surplus log to a private diagnostic shard and went downstairs. The breathing office occupied the basement of the audit hall, below compliance, below appeals, below the room where citizens could request a correction after the correction no longer mattered. Its doors were older than the city seal. A sign above them read, Source Integrity. Inside, hundreds of respiration models pulsed in vertical tanks of light. Each citizen had a civic breath, a legal pattern used to settle disputes when body data contradicted economic data. An old technician named Sela sat at the intake desk, eating apple slices with the seriousness of contraband. No public access today, Sela said. I am not public. Everyone is public on Dividend morning. Mara slid her badge across the scanner. I need a historical match. Sela glanced at the badge, then at Mara's wrist. The hidden dividend number had begun glowing through the fabric. 42 liters, Sela said softly. That is a lot of civic virtue for someone who looks terrified. Can you run it? Sela did. The old systems did not flatter the user with progress animations. They thought in silence until the answer became unavoidable. The match appeared under a family archive header. Cal household / neonatal subaccount. Name, Elian Cal. Status, non-viable. Archive date, 26 years prior. Mara read the line 3 times before it became language. Elian had been her brother, a child her mother spoke of only when the air was very bad and memory could disguise itself as fever. He had lived 11 minutes during the first rationing crisis, when the hospital ventilation failed floor by floor and the city recorded triage decisions as weather damage. Mara's voice came out flat. Dead citizens do not receive dividends. Sela did not look at her. They are not supposed to. On the screen, the waveform breathed again. Shallow inhale. Pause. Longer exhale. The city had kept Mara's brother alive as a number, and that number had been breathing through her account. The subledger was not hidden behind encryption. That would have implied shame. It was hidden behind language. Sela took Mara through a maintenance corridor to a terminal labeled Historical Adjustment Reservoir. No citizen would look there for stolen air. Reservoirs sounded passive. Historical adjustment sounded like dust. Inside were 118,904 accounts. Stillborn children, evacuation casualties, unregistered migrants, prisoners declared administratively absent, elders removed when families could no longer afford remembrance penalties. None of them were alive. All of them were useful. Their civic breath profiles had been preserved as legal containers. Council excess, sponsor deficits, and mayoral ceremony debt could be routed into ghost profiles. The city could borrow restraint from people with no lungs left to object. Mara found Elian in the middle of a transfer map. For 26 years, her brother had absorbed deficit from the ministry residence, the sealed schools, the executive tram line, and 7 private clinics that did not appear on public maps. The most recent transfer had arrived at 0114. Source, mayoral household. Reason, ceremony stabilization. Amount, 30. 1 liters. Then the algorithm routed the surplus into Mara's account to close a family loop and make the ghost profile auditable as living restraint. Why me? Mara asked. Sela folded her hands. Because your mother still lists him on household memory forms. Those are ceremonial. Nothing is ceremonial to a system looking for permissions. Mara opened the scanned forms. Every year under household dependence remembered, her mother had written, Elian Cal, 11 minutes, still hours. The city had accepted the love as authorization. For a moment Mara could not think in legal categories. She saw her mother at the kitchen table, handwriting trembling from oxygen debt, paying a small remembrance fee because grief without receipt was treated as hoarding. Then an alert split the screen. Unauthorized subaltern access. Tavin's face appeared in the terminal reflection before he entered the room. Mara, he said. Step away. 2 atmosphere security officers stood behind him with polite masks and stun cuffs. Their respirators were ministry-grade, quiet enough to sound like morality. Mara copied nothing. She did not need to. The system had already copied itself into her head. Tavin lowered his voice. There is a settlement offer. Sella laughed once. It was not a happy sound. Your mother's allocation becomes permanent, Tavin said. Medical oxygen, no reviews, no copay, no grief penalty. You certify your own anomaly as corrected. The subaltern remains sealed pending modernization. Pending deletion. Pending modernization. How many people know? Enough to make exposure complicated, not enough to make it survivable. Mara looked at Elian's waveform, still breathing calmly through a city that had killed him once and employed him afterward. If I refuse, Tavin's face changed then, not cruelty. Worse, administrative pity. Your mother enters review today. By law, all household-linked anomalies freeze dependent allocations. The officers waited. The city ventilation adjusted half a degree cooler. Mara wondered how many citizens had mistaken that sensation for weather. Dividend Day turned Veyer into a theater of grateful lungs. At noon, workers paused beneath factory vents. Children in sealed classrooms placed hands over their meters. Hospital patients watched from beds while nurses pretended not to calculate which rooms would lose pressure by evening. Mayor Orland Vale stood on the central broadcast balcony under a sky the city projected because the real one had been brown for 11 years. Today, he said, Veyer returns discipline as dignity. Applause moved through the public channels. Some of it was real, most of it was scheduled. Mara stood in a service booth beneath the balcony, wearing an atmosphere security jacket Sella had taken from a laundry rack with surprising calm. Her mother was on a private call in the corner of the screen. You look like your father before he did something stupid, her mother said. Was he afraid? Always. That was how I knew he was paying attention. Mara swallowed. They offered your oxygen. Good, then we know the price of your silence. It is a good price. Her mother's concentrator Drew filtered sighed. No, her mother said. It is only an accurate one. The ceremony system opened for final certification. Mara's badge still had auditor permissions. Tavin had not revoked them, either because he hoped she would comply or because bureaucracy was slowest when morality depended on speed. The mayor continued above her. Every leader returned today was saved by a citizen who chose restraint over appetite. Mara entered the certification field. Anomaly, Cal household surplus. Action, correct/escalate/public exception. Her finger hovered. Tavin's message arrived on the side channel. Do not make this symbolic. Mara almost smiled. The city had already done that. It had turned breath into virtue, grief into permission, and her brother into a bucket for powerful lungs. She selected public exception. The booth lights turned red. The ceremony script stuttered. Mayor Vale's smile held for 1 second longer than a human smile should. Then the broadcast screens behind him changed. Cal Elian, status, non-viable. Oxygen dividend pending, 31 liters. The city fell silent in a way Mara had never heard before. Not quiet. Quiet still had machines in it. This was the silence of millions of people deciding whether they had understood the same impossible thing. Mara routed the subaltern into the ceremony feed. Names began appearing. Babies, evacuees, heat deaths, prison absences, clinic erasures. Whole families from flooded wards that official maps now marked as foundation. Each name carried a dividend. Each dividend carried a source. Ministry residence. Council school air loop. Private Clinic 7. Mayoral Household. Mayor Vale turned away from the cameras, but the cameras belonged to the Dividend Authority, and the Dividend Authority was busy confessing. Tavin entered the booth with 2 officers. "Shut it down," he said. Mara did not move. Sella's voice came through the maintenance channel. "They can cut the broadcast." "Then cut it." They tried. On the screen, a system warning opened. "Broadcast termination requires cancellation of active dividend ceremony. Cancellation invalidates monthly oxygen market." Mara understood then why the city had seemed invincible for so long. It had made its cruelty load-bearing. The first riot did not begin with shouting. It began with people checking family forms. Across Vair, citizens opened household memory pages and found small names they had paid to keep: stillbirths, evacuation losses, uncollected bodies from the flood years, a grandmother removed from the legal household but not from the kitchen wall, a son declared administratively absent after a prison fever, a wife whose death certificate had used the word respiratory because the word neglect had no municipal field. The dead had accounts. The accounts had been breathing. The breathing had been profitable. Mara kept the feed open as long as she could. Security dragged her from the booth before the 8,000th name. The cuffs sealed around her wrists and immediately began measuring stress respiration. Demerit risk, elevated. She laughed. It frightened one of the officers. They took her to a holding room inside the balcony foundation. The walls were thick but not thick enough to stop the sound of a city inhaling all at once. Tavin came alone after 20 minutes. His hair was damp. His ministry respirator hung loose at his throat. "Your mother is safe," he said. Mara looked up. "For now," he added because he was still honest in small, useless ways. "And the ledger? Locked. Deleted." He did not answer. The holding room screen flickered. Someone outside had patched public comments into the emergency system. Messages moved too quickly to read. Then one stayed fixed long enough. "My sister had a dividend." Another followed. "My father paid the mayor's heir." Then, "If they can breathe for them, they can pay them." Mara leaned back against the wall. Tavin sat across from her. For the first time since she had known him, he seemed unsure which rules were supposed to make him human. "Do you know what happens if every ghost account becomes payable?" he asked. "The city admits it's dead. The city bankrupts. Those are not different statements." At 14:06, the Dividend Authority attempted to purge the historical adjustment reservoir. The purge failed because too many ghost accounts were tied to active market instruments. Removing them would erase the collateral that made the month's oxygen price legal. The market halted. Clinics lost automated priority. Council towers dropped to public baseline for 7 minutes. People in sealed penthouses discovered the sound of their own unassisted breathing and filed emergency complaints with no category attached. At 14:19, the city offered a compromise. All ghost accounts would be memorialized, forgiven, and retired. At 14:22, the ledger rejected the command, not because it was alive. That was the first official statement. Because retirement required next of kin consent, and in 442 cases, next of kin had also been converted into historical adjustment containers. The dead were legally holding each other open. At 15:01, Mara's mother appeared on every public screen in the city, not because the ministry invited her, because citizens had begun forwarding her old memory form until it became a kind of warrant. She sat upright beside the concentrator, hair pinned badly, eyes bright with insufficient oxygen and excellent anger. "My son breathed 11 minutes, she said. "The city used him for 26 years. I would like his dividend paid to the wards that lost air the night he died." Someone in the crowd outside the balcony began repeating it. "Pay the wards." Then others. "Pay the wards." The phrase moved through Vair like ventilation reversing direction. The Continuum received the Vair cash 3 months after Dividend Day, buried inside a municipal weather export labeled LOW Priority Humidity. By then, Vair City had survived in the technical sense. The mayor resigned for health reasons. The Ministry of Atmosphere dissolved into 3 smaller offices with longer names and fewer windows. The oxygen dividend was suspended, reinstated, appealed, renamed, and suspended again. Hospitals received emergency air without household review for the first time in city history. The official archive calls the event a ledger malfunction. The recovered cash does not. It contains Mara Cal's audit shard, Sella's maintenance route, Tav and Hess's settlement memo, 118, 904 ghost profiles, and 1 file the city tried hardest to quarantine. Elian Cal / dividend disposition. The file shows that after public pressure, Elian's accumulated oxygen credit was paid into Ward 16, where the hospital ventilation had failed 26 years before. For 41 minutes, every bed in that ward received full clean air. No one died there that afternoon. That is not the strange part. The strange part came later. After the payout, Elian Cal's account should have closed. Instead, the profile remained active with no source household, no dependent claim, and no biometric anchor. It recorded 1 breath every 12 minutes. Inhale, hold, exhale. The pattern did not match Mara, her mother, the hospital, the mayoral household, or any known ventilation artifact. The city attempted deletion. The account accepted the command as a contribution and converted it into credit. Other retired accounts followed. Not all at once. That would have made the story easier to dismiss. 1 account in the flood districts, 2 in the prison infirmary, a line of neonatal profiles from the first rationing crisis. Then elders, then migrants, then people whose names had never been allowed into the city in the first place. Each recorded a breath too small to matter economically. Together, they moved the market. Mara's final appearance in the cache is an interview before the Transitional Air Committee. She looks thinner than in the audit footage. Her wrist meter has been removed, leaving a pale ring where the sensor used to sleep against her pulse. A council advocate asks whether she believes the ghost accounts represent persons, artifacts, fraud, or grief. Mara answers after a long time. I think the city trained a ledger to ask who counts as alive, then became angry when it kept asking. The committee transcript marks laughter. The audio records none. Veyer's current government denies that ghost respiration continues. Its public dashboard lists all oxygen distributions as citizen-verified, body-anchored, and free of historical adjustment instruments. The Continuum copy receives an update every month. Usually it is just a number. Sometimes it is a name. The most recent packet arrived without sender, origin, or valid civic signature. It contained a single dividend receipt for 0.03 liters of clean air. Recipient field unclaimed. Household field all. Status field breathing.